Yeah, boy, on time album reviews are back. I don't even know when the last time was that I dropped a review or a video on an album within a few days of it dropping, but here we are. Recently, I asked you guys on my YouTube community tab what you would like to see more of from my channel, and quite a few people said more short form album reviews on stuff that's just dropped, and I like the sound of that too, so here we are. And look at this. We've even got a new title format, the good, the bad, and the ugly album reviews. I think it has a nice ring to it. So today we're going to be looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly of the new collab album that just dropped from two of the biggest names in mainstream hip hop right now, Lil Baby and Lil Durk, the voice of the heroes. In my opinion, of course. Let's not waste any more time and let's jump right into it. This is CDTVProductions. And let's talk about this album.
I know how I feel to think everybody against you. I know how I feel to watch bullets go through a windshield. I know how I feel when you try your best to be real.
So, the voice of the heroes. If you're familiar with my channel, or just my opinions in general, you'll know that generally, I'm not the biggest fan of Lil Baby or Lil Durk to begin with. My most recent video before this one was my video on Lil Baby, and my worst rappers in the game, question mark, very important question mark right there, series, breaking down what I like and dislike about every single aspect of his music. And Baby is someone who, at this point in his career, I think is just okay at best. I haven't listened to nearly as much of Durk's music, but from what I have heard, he isn't very interesting to me either. All that is to say, my expectations already were pretty low before going into this collaborative album between them. And hey, in a few tracks, those expectations were exceeded. The first couple tracks in particular, Voice of the Heroes and 2040, kicked the project off in a pretty strong way that had me thinking, hey, maybe I'm gonna like this album. I don't know. I've not really liked Lil Durk or Baby before, but maybe this will be the one that changes my mind. Aside from the poor mixing on Durk's vocals in 2040, which kinda detracted from how enjoyable his verse was on it, these two songs still had really nice performances from both rappers. And 2040 had some hard-ass production.
How to put a wide body on a lamb truck and look sexy, calling me yours. Fucked up playing around, now I'm serious. I got 200 bands in each ear. I ain't never gonna
bitch for what? I give you everything you want. Bitch for what? I call bitch right out the blue when I'm off this perk like get this nut.
That was followed up by Hats Off, which again had good performances at its core and I still somewhat enjoyed, but again, the mixing. Who the hell mixed Baby's vocals on here? The mixing didn't make his vocals completely unintelligible or like unhearable, but it sounded more like I was listening to a low quality leak of the song than an official final release. The mixing of the vocals is actually an issue throughout a fair chunk of this album, primarily on Baby's end. It's pretty distracting on Hats Off, Still Hood, Who I Want, and Medical. Durk suffers from this on a couple tracks like Man of My Word and How It Feels. Put on a decent set of headphones when you listen to those songs and it is clear as day, especially when like one rapper on the track has really clear mixing on their vocals and the other one doesn't. The transition just sounds so strange. But as I said, it's mainly an issue on Baby's end.
I know how I feel to how the killers tell you everything. I know how I feel to wake up caught up for them bad brains.
You know what I can bring to the table. I can tell if it's real by the label. We had TV but we didn't have cable. Now I'm richer than all of my neighbors.
While I'm talking about him, one of my biggest gripes with this album is Lil Baby, honestly. Before this project, I thought I at least enjoyed Baby more than Durk, but Durk had the most highlights on this project and, very surprisingly for me, actually carried the good parts of it. I'm considering checking out more of his music now because while I didn't love him throughout this, I'm definitely not a fan by any means. He carried the album on his shoulders. First of all, there's just the fact that you get more variation and emotion with Durk. There's a few tracks on here where he does his drill style and straight up raps without any autotune on tracks like Still Running, 2040 and Lying. But what does Baby do on these tracks? The exact same flows and delivery you pretty much always hear from him. I swear, if you've listened to My Turn and Harder Than Ever, you've legitimately already heard almost everything Baby has to offer on here. Some of the flows were straight up repeated from those mixtapes. There is glimmers of Baby trying something that's a little bit more outside of his comfort zone vocally, like his more emotional tone on the hook of Please, which was really nice to hear, but there's nowhere near enough of that. He also came through with energy on the songs 2040, How It Feels, That's Facts, and Bruised Up.
Ours the jewels, the titles, the deeds, the streets, the beef, whatever, they know what's up. I'm 4 pockets, I pop out with OTF. We gon' be at the top, you can meet us there.
But outside of those, it's mostly the same repetitive, monotonous Lil Baby. Also, it was very interesting to hear Baby taking inspiration from Blueface's Find the Beat album at the start of the song OK.
Why the fuck they put my business on the blog? Sister know they never gotta get a job. Brody said he'd rather spend shit and rob. Damn, dog.
So with that being said, let's talk more about how I felt about Durk. First of all, I can see why Durk is referred to as the voice on here, because he was the only one bringing the vocals on this project. But honestly, he should be the hero too, because his presence saved this album. I know, I'm surprised I'm saying these words too. I've rarely had much positive to say about Durk before, but for the majority of the tracks that I enjoyed on this album, it was because of how he performed. Like I said earlier, his rapping on 2040, Still Running and Lying, Durk actually has a pretty strong presence on a track when he's doing his no auto-tune Durk stuff.
Rock with a switch, 2 of those when I ride through the city. And we thought a nigga died, but he didn't. 2 blocks when you ride through Philly.
I wish the album had more of that, but I also did find myself enjoying some of his melodic singing stuff here as well. Not as much, but some of it still sounded good to my ears. A few of his hooks in particular, he managed to put a decent amount of emotion into them, and it resulted in some that sounded pretty nice. There wasn't anything from him on here that blew me away or made me a fan, but in terms of this album, he was significantly more interesting to listen to than Baby. Baby. When it comes to the features, this album does have exactly what you would expect from the features for a big trap album. Travis Scott, Young Thug, Meek Mill, Rod Wave, but for the most part, some of these features were the best parts of the album for me, so I can't really complain that much about them being the typical trap features. I thought Travis's flows were very slick, especially when he did those high-pitched, dragged-out notes at the end of his lines. Rod Wave was on here to show Baby what strong emotional vocals sound like, providing one of the best choruses across this whole thing. Even if it is exactly what you'd expect from Rod Wave, it still sounded nice. And Meek, as you would expect, came through with his usual high energy that always works great for a guest verse. Surprisingly, the only one that was lacking for me was Young Thug on Up the Side. I really like Thug, he's probably my favourite rapper that appears on this album, but I just wasn't really feeling the track that he's on, which is a shame because he probably has one of the most dynamic voices that's featured on this album. But for the most part, the features were a plus on the voice of the heroes. To be blunt, the best summary I can give for this album is that it's pretty much like every typical mainstream trap album that's dropped recently. A few highlights that actually stand out, hidden within a bunch of mediocre songs, with the typical trap album features, resulting in an album that's way longer than it needs to be. And if you guys are familiar with my channel or my opinions, you'll know that I'm not a trap bad, lyrical miracle, flibbity hibbity rap good type of hip-hop fan. I listen to music from all different rap subgenres and appreciate it all, but just recently in the past year or two, I feel like a lot of trap albums have just been bloated and sounding kind of rushed. Outside of some Durk performances that had me a little more interested to go and check out some more of his music, this album was pretty much just what I expected from, in my opinion, 2 of the most overhyped artists in the game right now. Also, before we close this out, as far as collab albums go, the chemistry is just fine. It's not amazing like when Young Thug and Future collaborate, for example. Durk and Baby are just decently paired together as far as I'm concerned. It was just something that left me feeling pretty bored before it finished. My favourite tracks on here were Voice of the Heroes, 2040, despite the mixing on Durk's verse, Still Running, That's Facts, and Rich Off Pain. Anything outside of that, I don't really see myself coming back to. Now, I don't really like giving things a number rating in my reviews anymore, but if I had to put this on a tier list with the tiers being S, A, B, C, and D, this would go in the C tier for me. And yeah, that is how I feel about the Voice of the Heroes. And once again, the fact that so many tracks on here have badly mixed vocals is shocking. That shouldn't be an issue with an album this big. Thank you for watching.
Down, we load we do it tomorrow, we do it on feet. Ask all the ops about us, so who said we shoot at the cars? That roads better be bulletproof, little nigga.